Hello, this is Chris Ott, and I am back with this series on metaphysics, and this is part 17. Now, in my last section, I talked about consciousness and how I define it, and especially in my second book, The Evolution of Perception Re-Explained. Just as I use a broad definition of the word perception in its original broad sense, which just means to become aware of anything, whether it's something mental or something physical around you with your senses, that's all considered perception in its original meaning in English from the Latin, which is meant to gather or take. So to take awareness of anything is perception. But just as I use a broad sense of that, I use a very narrow sense of the word consciousness. And I went over that in the last part, in part 16. And I use the word consciousness simply to mean awake or aware, but not aware of an object, because I would just simply call that perception. Because that is the actual original meaning of the word perception. It means to become aware of something. So if I'm aware of a painting on the wall, and I'm conscious that there's a painting on the wall, well, I'm perceiving that there's a painting on the wall. So that's already captured under my word perception, the idea of being aware of something. So I just use it to mean wakefulness, but wakefulness, being conscious, being awake, is a necessary precondition for perceiving. You have to be awake to perceive, as I'm using the term. You can't become aware of the painting on the wall if you're unconscious. That's like an oxymoron. It's you have to be conscious to perceive, as I'm defining perceive. But you don't have to be perceiving to be conscious. Meditators report, as I said, I'm going over what I said before, meditators report having objectless awareness. They simply are awake and conscious, aware, but they are not perceiving thoughts or objects around them. They keep their eyes closed to not see the things around. They kind of let all that go, or they report being able to do that. I can't do that. I'm basically perceiving all the time. All the time that I'm awake, I'm either perceiving thoughts or daydreams or objects around me. And when I'm semi-conscious, I'm in sleep mode, I'm experiencing dreams. So that's still perceiving, as I'm defining it. But, and then when I'm fully in deep sleep, then I'm unconscious. I neither perceive, nor is there any awareness there. Okay, so I want to say the importance of this. Now, when I edit these videos, I sometimes notice something if I said I was going to say something, because I have to watch everything I said in the last thing to do the editing. And I noticed that I said I would never use the word conscious. Well, I have to kind of explain what I meant and what I was talking about, because I never covered it after I said that. What I meant is I would never substitute my word perception with the word conscious, because it wouldn't convey what I'm trying to convey. And I have a system called the evolution of perception, and that is exactly what I mean. The evolution of perception, I don't mean, you can't substitute that and say, oh, he means an evolution of consciousness. No, I don't. Not as I'm defining consciousness. But I pointed out that there are a lot of meanings of uses of the word consciousness, and one of them basically is perception. So, or mental activity. Stuff that flows through your mind, or even just perceiving objects, anything. The flow of perceptions. That is a meaning that some people use the word consciousness for, but I'm not using it that way. I just mean awake. So that doesn't fit. Now I have to say why it's important that this be divided. and why it's not important to keep emphasizing consciousness. I bring this up, when I published my second book, I had a book signing, and a guy who doesn't know anything about philosophy at all, or perception at all, he's a geologist, but a nice guy, but he said, oh, well, what you meant was an evolution of consciousness. You meant consciousness. You used the wrong word. And I've actually heard that before. I haven't used the wrong word. People don't know that I define my words, and they don't read my stuff, and they think they know what words mean, but words have different meanings, and I'm using them in very specific ways. So I want to be sure that I explain why the word consciousness is wrong. And it's unnecessary. First of all, because being conscious is a necessary condition for perceiving, when I'm talking about perceiving, I'm including consciousness. You see? Because I don't in my definition of terms, there's no such thing as unconscious perceiving. That would be a complete contradiction. It couldn't exist. You can't perceive while you're unconscious. You have to be conscious to perceive. So that's what I mean. I'm talking about conscious perceiving. So if there's an evolution of perception, there's obviously a concurrent evolution of consciousness, in a sense, because they kind of go along together. They work in tandem. And this evolution was inspired by the teachings of Meher Baba. And he had a chapter in his main book called The Evolution of Consciousness. And anybody who knows that I'm inspired by the writings of Meher Baba might think that's what I'm trying to say, but I didn't know how to say it. No, Meher Baba is talking about something, which I'm going to have to explain what he's talking about. So you see that I'm talking about something he covers in his system, but using slightly different language. So let me explain. In Meher Baba's teaching, there's a goal, there's a purpose. In fact, that's part of the title of his book is God Speaks the Purpose and Theme of Creation. So purpose of life is part of his theme. And for him, the purpose of life, of evolution, of everything coming into being, and us finding ourselves in that world, the purpose is for us to gain what he calls God realization. That in the beginning, there was God unconscious, and then the whole journey is a journey to God conscious, and then he realizes in each individual there's a moment called God realization. And actually in some traditions it's also called, to have that concept, it's called mukti or moksha. And this is where the individual soul, who's really the oversoul, but experiencing itself as a finite entity, it has the realization that it's not all the things that it has thought itself to be over the course of its many lifetimes or its evolution through animal and plant life. That all that journey was to realize that it was none of those things. So the journey of the soul is a journey completely in consciousness. It's not a journey walking. It's a journey, I would say, a sort of a dreamed or internal journey. And the purpose of it is to experience first all the things that you're not before you can experience what you really are, which is the one who is the dreamer, the creator itself. Now, this doesn't just happen once. It's like it repeats. With each individual, all the things in creation are making this journey from the original state to the final state. And Baba makes this even more clear by describing 10 different states that God is in. And one of them is in its original state, fully unconscious, and then all these forms and evolution and all these lifetimes, those are states, and I'm in a state. And then one day when I get God realized, I'm in a state. And that's actually has a number in that 10 states of God. So there's this sort of psychic journey, and that all the things that we see around us and feel and touch and that we call physical, those are sort of byproducts, phenomenal byproducts of that journey. Because with the sense organs and the nervous systems that we evolve, we take experience of those things that we call the physical world, and they have those qualities that we name as physical, and they obey the laws of physics, so that's the sense in which they're physical. But they have no substance outside of being perceived. Well, anyway, I'm probably going too much on tangent here. Let me get back to what I'm trying to get at. So the reason that a soul has to first be conscious of all these false things by perceiving them is because he needs to gain full wakefulness. Because how can you become God-realized and know your real identity if you're not fully conscious, fully awake, fully aware? So that, he says, is sort of like what this is all for, is gaining that consciousness that you need to have God-realization. But in order, part of the way that you develop that is by a series of media. A medium is something that Baba is a word Baba uses for a body. A body is still phenomenal. You can look at your body. It's not like some mysterious thing. It's phenomenal. It's part of the world of experience. It's part of that dream that God's having. And I identify with that body when I'm born, and it's produced by the mold of the impressions left over from the previous form that I experienced the world as. And in each form that I take, over first evolution and then many lives, I'm acquiring greater and greater capacity to perceive because of evolved sense organs and so on. And this brings along with it increased consciousness, because it requires more consciousness in order to perceive. So the evolution of the perceiving is the evolution of these media, like this body, these eyes, this brain that I have. All this is necessary for me to perceive. It is the medium that I perceive with. You remove that medium, and I can't perceive. There's still a me, but I'm just the consciousness. Okay, the wakefulness that awaits. But the legacy of one life is carried over into next. But these are just sort of memories. They're called sanskaras. Well, the point of all this is that you have two things evolving in tandem. Well, really three. You have consciousness increasing, that's evolving, and you have the media are evolving. The body's like, a worm is not as is a medium for experiencing a sort of rudimentary amount of consciousness and perceiving, but then a zebra has much more. A medium that's appropriate for experiencing much more consciousness and being more awake and perceiving much more of the world. And then finally, as a human being, he says that you're fully conscious, you're fully awake now. You're still deluded about who you are because you're really the creator, but you're fully conscious. And you can perceive the whole universe. Now, not at all at the same time, but bit by bit, if you got in a spaceship, you go around and you could see the dark side of the moon. We can perceive anything, and we can understand anything if it's explained to all, and we give it some thought. So we are the perfect vehicle, this body with the brain and the eyes and so forth. So now, I covered a lot just now, and maybe that wasn't so clear, but if I said it all again, it still wouldn't be so much better. You kind of have to read Mayor Baba's own book, God Speaks, because that's what he's doing. And these sanskaras that are gathered and then expressed from life to life to life, first through evolution and then as human reincarnations, these are his evolution of perception. But they are facilitating the evolution of consciousness. And that consciousness is necessary to achieve God realization at the end of your journey when you're ready, which takes many lifetimes even after you're a human being, because there's a lot of stuff you've got to sort of unload that you've gathered impressionally from your evolution and so forth. And that's the subject of his book. But now, so what do we need, and let me express this way. So the two things, consciousness, perception, and the media, they all are evolving in tandem with each other, kind of like, a tandem bicycle has two seats, one before the other, and they can also have three. And that's sort of the way it is. There's these three things being pulled along. But the purpose of the evolution of perception and these media is to gain consciousness so that you can get God realization. So I'll give an analogy. Let's say that I have a desire for to buy a big bar of gold that I saw in a store that, a gold metals store. And I want that. That's the God realization. I want the brick of gold. Well, to get the gold, what are the necessary conditions for me to get the gold? Well, I got to have the money. If I have the money, the guy will give me the brick of gold. But I don't have the money. So what's the necessary condition that I have to attain in order to get that money? Well, I got to get a job, and I got to work. I got to work for a long time. So what's the goal in all this? The goal is really the gold, okay? Once I have that, that's like my God realization. That's the real purpose. That's the driving purpose of life. However, you have two other things that I'm aiming for, but they're all in service to facilitate getting the gold. So I'm working, but that's not my goal. My goal isn't to have to work. Okay, I actually just have to work because I got to save the money. But the money isn't even my goal. What am I going to do with just some money? It's just paper. And I want to go, and when I get enough together, I'm going to go and buy that brick of gold. And that's my goal. So you get it. So I'm working to get the money to get the gold. But ultimately, the whole thing is I'm working to get the gold. So that's what Meher Baba is saying. He's saying, you go through this process, and he says sort of, but it's all to gain consciousness. But it's really to gain consciousness for this purpose. And also, that's not all you're gaining, because in order to gain that consciousness, you also have to evolve higher and higher, more sophisticated media to have that consciousness. And so you have to evolve a brain and a nervous system and eyes and ears, and you have to, and this is the human form, and that's the sense in which this is the perfect form. And Meher Baba said that, and Leonardo da Vinci, drew that, with the ratios to try and show that the human form is an ideal, perfect set of ratios. And that no other animal form or plant form contains those things. It even contains the squared circle. You go look. It's the Man by Leonardo da Vinci. He wasn't just doing an illustration of a man. He was trying to show the sacred geometry that was perfect in the human form. And but that's not what Baba means by perfect. He means it's the suitable, sufficient medium for attaining God realization. So you have to evolve this body and because the consciousness requires the body, the perception requires the body, the consciousness, and so forth. It all works together. All these things are evolving together. But I simplify things. Because although I talk about evolution of forms in my book, the main thing is I just have simplified it to this basically just seeing and ways of seeing, which I mean perceiving and perceptual schemas. That's all it takes to create the entire universe and you in it. But you're the witness. You're the perceiver. But really God is. But you're God having an individual experience of that journey. And this, so I make it very simple. So I have an evolution of perception. But to go, oh, well, you mean consciousness? No, you don't. You have to understand what I'm saying before you can tell me what I mean. Because consciousness just means being awake, and you have to be awake to perceive. So I'm already including that when I say perceive. If I say I see the painting on the wall, it's implicit. It's implied that I am awake, or I wouldn't be able to see that picture on the wall. So I don't have to go, it's an evolution of perception and it's an evolution of consciousness. I don't need to say that because they're already packed together. They come in tandem. Now, that's probably all I have to say about this. Baba says there is a state. It's one of the states of the 10 states of God, in fact. There is a state where there's just a consciousness, where you're just conscious and there's no object, so you're not perceiving, and that's very late, actually. See, in the beginning, you're unconscious and not perceiving, and then right before your God realization, there's a state which he says is what Buddha meant by when he described nirvana, and it's just the experience of being consciousness, and you're just conscious, but it's objectless consciousness. It's objectless awareness. Sort of like you are awakeness itself. That's Buddhism. And that's why Baba says the Buddhists are misinterpreting Buddha because he emphasized nirvana. They took him to mean there is no God. It's because he emphasized this consciousness. But then he said that nirvana lasts a very short time. It's sort of momentary. It's something you pass through. And then the very next experience is you go, oh, I'm God, and you experience yourself as God. Now, what is God? Remember, it's not a person. We mustn't reify it. It's the infinite intelligence, but it's more than consciousness. And it has attributes like power, knowledge, and bliss. But it doesn't have attributes like, long legs and strong arms. It's not that kind of thing. It's not physical. The whole journey is not physical. And what I just described is a psychogenic evolution. Psychogenic means having a psychic rather than a physical origin. Everything is psyche originally meant soul, and in this description of the universe, we have the idea of sort of the logos or the oversoul or supreme soul. There's this one infinite intelligence that always existed, but had to awaken and discover itself. And that is what we mean by God, is the state in which God experiences has had his full experience. But it's all God. A worm is really God having a worm experience, and I am really God having a dumb guy with a YouTube channel experience. And in the beginning, when there was it was just sort of the unconsciousness. That was God being unconscious. So it's all God from beginning to end. All 10. That's why there's 10 states of God, and it covers everything. It covers everything from metals and gas to worms and animals and people, and even the planes of consciousness where you experience these higher states. But those are all done as a person in a body. So you have to have the body even to experience those transcending experiences that we've heard of that are called involution or they're even in Christianity, but they're in Christian mysticism. These stages, these states that the human being can experience before attaining what is in Christianity called mystical union, and Baba calls God realization. And that's all. Thank you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.